Hello everybody, welcome to an episode of Analytics Mindset. In this case, I will go over the Associate Data Practitioner certification from Google Cloud. I just got the certification yesterday. That will be August the 16th of 2025. 2026, and the reason why 2025, the reason why I'm doing this certification I did and I am sharing with you is one, I didn't see a lot of videos actually that explain the certification, and two, it will also show that I did pass certification. It is a very comprehensive. It is very, very comprehensive. And yeah, without further ado, I will go ahead and tell you more about it. So this certification, as you can see here, has a quick setup, a quick brief overview that you can secure and manage data in Google Cloud. It goes through a lot of Google Cloud services. And you're gonna need to, at least in my experience, there is 3 main parts of the exam. Then I will go to the actual study guide. But for me, was ETL. That's where your data form, data prep, data proc, Spark, etc. comes into. That data flow is very important for this exam. Comes into place. Then you have your actual data governance with Dataplex is very small. Looker is very important. BigQuery is very important. I did not expect to have as much SQL testing the exam as I did. I've been a data analyst for the last 3.5 years, almost 4. That was rather easy for me, but if you don't have experience with SQL, for sure the exam makes it feel like you don't need to, but you actually do. And you expect at least 2 questions. Very, very comprehensive SQL all the way to window functions. You will also go into how to store things in Google Cloud, and I will say the biggest part of the exam is at the associate level. You are not looking at the fundamental level. I did take both data leader and the AI leader, as you can see somewhere in this or in the actual certification list playlist. But at the associate level, you're expected to actually know what you need to use. It will say a scenario, and then will say you need to decide what to use. It is a lot more comprehensive, and the nature of the questions is a lot. Not difficult, I will say in my case, but I also have plenty of experience with Google Cloud. It's just a different target. You are not just being tested vocabulary, you are being tested. Do you know how to do this? Do you know which platform does that? Do you have experience with this? And that's the big difference there. It's an intermediate level certification. That's where the little jump in difficulty comes in. You can see that you need to pass a 50 to 60 item multiple choice proctor exam. You will need to have somebody watching you. You either can do it at home, as I did, or in a testing center. I would prefer personal testing center. Unfortunately, these hours did not work for me. Just needed to do it by myself at home. It can be very stressful. It's a 2-hour exam. 50 to 60 questions, and you can see here that there is all related certifications, but yeah, we will go to the actual page of the exam. You can see here it's a newer exam. It was just pushed through 3 months ago, I believe. It was in beta until not recently. This page gives you a ton of results as well. You will have these little bullet points. The study guide is also here that we'll go into it in a bit. It will cost you $125 to actually take the exam. A little trick is if you take an exam before on Google Cloud Platform, the next one is half the price. I took advantage of the cloud digital leader to then take the AI leader half the price and then use that voucher to take this one half the price. It still has a step cost, especially for a lot of people, but it is way better paying only $62.5 than $125 for sure. You will also have no prerequisites, but the recommended experience is 6 months of experience with the Google Cloud Platform. And it only lasts about 2 years, 3 years. After 3 years, you will need to renew it with another shorter exam that I plan to do. I do plan to have this one as one of my core certifications that I need to maintain with the passage of time. You should get real world experience. You can understand what's next in the study guide that we're going to go through. Then you have the actual path. There is the learning path that is around 26 to 27 hours. A lot more comprehensive than the beginner level exams. You will need to grind. It was very stressful for me to finish all of it, but it will help you understanding the exam a lot more than if you were just going blind there. You can also do sample questions is form a Google form that you can take and it will give you some sampling of them. I strongly recommend you doing that. If you go into here, you will see it really quickly. And you can actually start there. So yeah, I strongly recommend you to go through this. If you will get 20 questions as sample. And finally, you need to schedule the exam and see when you're gonna take it. Now, in the actual study guide, what does it come in the exam? Section 1 is data preparation and ingestion, and also all of it comes in the study path. You can see here every single of them. It's a little bit different, but it does align pretty well. It's Introduction to Data Engineering Google Cloud. This one is the heaviest theory course. You will get a lot of things here. Then derive insights from BigQuery data. You get a lot of SQL. If you're not familiar with SQL, again, I am very familiar with SQL, but even I needed to remind myself of some stuff. And I would say too, it's not learning the syntax itself, but how to use the syntax to figure out what you need to query. There is some use cases that I don't do at all. Google seems very laser focused on them. That's just my personal opinion. Again, I only have been a data analyst for 3 years. Personal opinion. Somebody in Google maybe has a lot more and decided this is more useful. But it focuses a lot in window functions. It focuses a lot in aggregations. It focuses a lot on rolling averages, though especially rolling averages. That's something that I just don't use a lot. ML models, how to train a logistic regression model in BigQuery. You can do that. It is very powerful, but I just don't see a lot of people doing it, especially for very large, and very large in my case, it's millions, hundreds of millions of records. Um, just keep that in mind. It forces you to think in a way the scenarios that you will use this only for this, and that might not be applicable to your experience. I was lucky that there was quite a bit of overlap in my case, but even then, there were some things that I just haven't done because I don't need to. Again, I don't need to use the having clause very often because I have pre-filters before. And then I usually take that data outside of BigQuery to do things. Google was very focused on use this, use that, what they call the Google recommended approach. Prepare data for Looker dashboards and reports. That was another one that I was not very familiar with because I am more in Power BI and Tableau. But yes, you will get to know Looker very, very, very in detail in this course. You will need to know how to share folders, how to share dashboards, how to modify dashboards. How do you modify a view of somebody? How do you share that view? How do you restrict views? Identity and access management, IAM, is a very, very important concept too. That it has its own section, but later on, but it's more like, hey, this is how you give permissions, this is how you create a custom permission, etc., etc. But the exam won't test you that. The exam assumes that you have experience giving those permissions, giving the read permission, giving the editor permission. What does the BigQuery data viewer permission does? What does the BigQuery data editor permission does in comparison to the data viewer? How do you create a custom permission that has both Google Cloud storage viewer and Google BigQuery viewer permissions? All of that be tested, but it's not here. You can go through the documentation linked at the end, but just keep in mind, some experience giving those permissions is strongly expected. That's something else that I have done in the past, likely. You will get introduction to my AI and machine learning on Google Cloud. There's a whole spectrum where you get all the way from Vertex AI Studio to the custom model, and you do need to know which model fits where, because again, these scenarios, a lot of them will test you on that. Basic infrastructure will go into a lot of how do you monitor stuff in Google Cloud, how do you get cost buckets, how do you control cost, optimizing cost with Google Cloud. I would say for me at least, I do have some certifications with Microsoft Azure. Cloud is cloud at the end of the day. There is 95% overlap. I used to have the Amazon AWS Google Cloud Practitioner. I let it expire because I work for Amazon's anti-nemesis, and obviously I will not use AWS. But between the three of them, it's pretty much the same. You get a bucket as much as the three big providers say we are exclusive. We have all of these things. We they're different. They are not. All of them are exactly the same. Yes, they call things differently. They have different capabilities, some here and there, especially on the database side or on the scalability. But the delivery infrastructure is the same. You are just getting some stuff from a cloud provider. You are just signing a contract that says I'll pay you $1 billion and you will give me access to these resources. Hopefully, it goes up, it goes down, and I will be able to control the costs. That's pretty much it. It's the same. You will create buckets in AWS. You will create buckets in Google Cloud. You will create buckets in Azure. You will then control the costs. You will be able to archive them. They call it iceberg or cold storage. You will be able to use some policies to retain stuff. How do you avoid them being modified? Again, it's literally exactly the same. As much as they will say otherwise to you, it's exactly the same. And finally, implement cloud security fundamentals on Google Cloud. You will see that this one is a lot of IAM. Actually, that's the reason why I gave up in the last 25%, because it's a lot of manual work. I was running a long time and I prefer to study for the study questions. There were things that were not applicable for me, like Kubernetes, create custom roles for it. I don't create custom roles. I don't have those permissions. I do give security roles, but I can only get the predefined. That's something yes out of my scope currently. And I was like, well, I could do it. It's gonna be still another 3 hours. Just finish a little, but I'll just get going. I strongly recommend you do not ignore the other ones. And also something else that you should know is that a lot of these ones, I will show you here, have this thing called credits. They are not totally free. Um, you will need to be careful with that because actually, yeah, this is fully free. But there is this thing called credits because I signed up to be the cloud innovator. I get 35 credits for free. That's not even enough to finish this certification. I did that. And in addition to that, I also got some more stuff in the cloud um, to get additional credits. They have a $1 few full subscription to get yourself in unlimited credits pretty much. But unfortunately for anybody else, you will need to sign up and probably spread your learning through 2 months because of this. A lot of these ones have credits, so you will see that you will need a credit. If I can show you, I will go to another. Probably this one has credits. But what are those? Some other recommendations. Definitely the cloud AI practitioner and the cloud AI leader and the cloud digital leader will help you a lot. There is a lot of overlap between the three of them. I strongly recommend you at least try them. You don't need to get certifications, but it is before the action in the chronological. They have the introductory first, then the associate, and then the professional ones that you will need 3+ years of experience with Google Cloud, very intensive experience. And I will say Google Cloud is not my full-time job. It is a big part of it, don't get me wrong, but usually I manage cloud resources. That's why I'm familiar with a lot of these things, but I manage them because I need to do something. I need to set up this database. I need to set up this. I need to help some people to do things, etc. I am not a cloud engineer. I may not never be, honestly. But if you are a cloud engineer, good luck. You will have a lot easier time getting those certifications than me or somebody that just doesn't have this kind of experience. It is a big boost to just be familiar with those services, even if it's just at a high level cost. But you can see here it costs 5 credits. You will need to get those credits somehow. Again, the way I did it, I exhausted the free ones first and then I got into the subscription. I am canceling it before it renews, but that's how I got my free credits. You will start these labs. These labs will actually guide you to do stuff, and you will start the lab and sign into the cloud shell in another tab, and you will have, depending on the lab, an hour, 30 minutes, 45 to do stuff. I found them very useful. They get you really good background knowledge on how to choose stuff in BigQuery. And with that, the last part of this video is going to be a quick review on the study guide and any tips that I may have there. You can see here, prepare and process data. You need to differentiate between ETL, ELT, and ETLTL. ETLT. It's pretty difficult to pronounce. Extract, transform, load. Extract, load, transform. Extract, transform, load, and then transform. That's what they stand for. They are different data engineering techniques. You will need to understand why to use each one. Generally, ETL, you extract things, then transform them, and then load them. When the data can be batched, generally, you can also do it with stream data, but that's a whole rabbit hole. And you need to ensure that the data is in a certain format, or you need to do some security checks before you load it into BigQuery. That is going to be your 90%, 90% of your loading in Google Cloud is going to be either BigQuery or cloud storage if you need some more unstructured data. ELT, extract, load, and transform. You extract things, then you load them, then you transform them. This is data flow comes into place here because you can get a lot of stuff. You can load it in a bucket, then you can transform it. Or ETLT, you transform stuff, then you load it, then you transform it again. An example of this would be you have pub/sub streaming, you transform it to aggregate it, then you load it into BigQuery. Then in BigQuery, you need to do a schedule query that further aggregates it because stream data is very granular and very big. And then you actually can see it in your dashboard. That will be an example of the dashboard. Google Cloud also focuses here in some data transfer tools. You have the storage transfer tool and the transfer appliance. You will need to know the differences between them and when to use each one. How do you assess data quality? That's mostly Dataplex. Conduct data cleaning. You have Cloud Data Fusion, BigQuery, SQL, and Dataflow. All of them come from data cleaning. They have different kind of focus, but you will need to know. You can do it in Data Fusion through an interface. That's mostly why. BigQuery, you can use SQL. Although if they say SQL, I do expect them to say Cloud SQL instead there. BigQuery is not a relational database, by the way. That's something important you will need to know here. It acts like a relational database. It wants you to believe it's a relational database, but it is not. Google Cloud offers multiple Cloud SQL, they call solutions for it, that are actual relational databases. But keep in mind, for the purpose of the exam, BigQuery is not one of them. And Dataflow, a very powerful tool built on Apache Beam. That's how I remember it mostly. That allows you to create very complex flows for both batch and streaming data. Dataflow is awfully powerful. Again, it comes a lot in the exam. My rule of thumb was if I don't know what service this belongs to, it's most likely Dataflow because Google seems to be pushing it very hard. You will need to also extract and load into the appropriate Google Cloud Storage service. So is it a CSV, is it a JSON, Parquet, Avro, or a structured database table? You will need to show which one do you need to extract. Again, the four that we mentioned before, even there's more too. And then where do you need to store it? Is it in Google Cloud Storage? The pictures, for example, you can only store them there because they're unstructured data or audio. BigQuery. BigQuery can store a lot of things, including both SQL-like tables and also JSON semi-structured stuff, but not everything. Cloud SQL. Sometimes it's the most efficient, especially if you already have a database. Firestore. Do you need small files? Bigtable. Is it humongous and doesn't have a lot of structure? Then you go to Bigtable. Or Spanner. Does it need to be available everywhere? Then that will be Spanner. You can load Google Cloud data through the BigQ command line. I strongly encourage you to get very familiar with the command line because the command line is going to help you a lot. And it will also make your transition to Google Cloud way easier. Storage transfer service, BigQuery, data transfer service, and client libraries. There is different ways. There is the also it's not mentioned here, but the database migration service will be your default for anything that involves, hey, I have this on-prem MySQL database, I have this on-prem um, SQL server. How do I migrate it? That will be the database migration service. You need to identify data patterns. How do you use BigQuery and Jupyter Notebooks hosted in BigQuery, not in on-prem? Remember that. You can use SQL queries. This is what it comes into it. Again, if you're not familiar with SQL, get very familiar, especially how to use it, because you're gonna get a lot of that stuff. Colab Enterprise comes from here and there, and then that you can host Jupyter Notebook without having them in GCP. Exactly speaking, it is kind of still, but you get my point. And how do you analyze data to answer business questions? Dashboards. All of them is gonna be Looker. Get very familiar with Looker, Looker Studio, and Look ML. That is the Google's response to Microsoft Fabric, kind of not, where you can do this semantic model and actually model the data before you show in the dashboard. You will need to identify a machine learning. How do you use machine learning models? Do we need BigQuery ML, Auto ML? Do you need a large language model? Do you need to use remote connection with BigQuery? How can you use the SQL syntax to create a BigQuery ML model? How do you perform inference using that model? And how do you organize all those models? Because sometimes, guess what? It can get very, very unorganized if you are not careful with that. Data pipeline orchestration. This is where the very confusing names and very similar services come into place. Data proc, data flow, data fusion, cloud composer, and data form. Data proc is Apache Spark 90% of the time. It allows you to do a lot of Spark funny stuff. Remember it like that. Data flow, I already said, built in Apache Beam. You can do a lot of stuff there. Data fusion, you can fuse a lot of very different stuff from different databases and different services. Cloud Composer, you can take your DAC files, your configuration files, and just push them into GCP. That's very nice. And Dataform is more of another line service with SQLX that BigQuery uses behind the scenes, and you can use to create schedule stuff all over the place. And it's just based more on SQL and JavaScript. You will need to see where you need to use ELT versus ETL, again, as I described before, and choose what products you need to use to actually use these basic transformation pipelines. Automation is not a big part of this exam, but it will come here and there. You will need to know how to manage schedule queries. You can do it through those three. BigQuery has Schedule Query tab, Cloud Composer, or Cloud Schedule. Data flow pipelines, you can use it through the data flow UI. You can also see all these logs into cloud logging and cloud monitoring. Cloud orchestration, you will have the three of them based on business requirements. Identify when you need to use PubSub to be query straight, you can do that. And event arc to trigger event-driven stuff. Event arc will help you a lot when you need to actually cloud functions will also help you with that. When you need to actually schedule something and make it run when something happens, not when something needs to happen on a regular basis. For that, you have other tools, as we just said before. And finally, data management. You will need to go into identity and access management that is sprinkled towards the exam. You will need to know that. How do you use the basic roles, predefined roles, and permissions for different data services? Compare the methods of access for all of them, example, private or public access, uniform access, and when do you want to share the data in the analytics hub? Lifecycle management includes also, as I mentioned before, when you need to store something, how long, does it need to be mutable or not, all of those things. And the high availability and disaster recovery multi-region. Can you do a dual region, multi-region, all regions? Which ones for data redundancy? How are all the things that Google recommends you for backup and recovery solutions? Do you care about time? Do you care how updated the data was? All of those things. And finally, the last part of it is compliance with data privacy regulations. That includes customer managed encryption keys that Google highly discourages. Customer supplied encryption keys, Google also discourages that, and Google managed encryption keys, that is that Google prefers it to have because they manage it. You just need to have the key stored. It's obvious why they prefer it, and they can charge you for it, obviously. And the standard role of the Cloud Key Management Service, KMS, to manage the encryption keys. And finally, you need to also be familiar with encryption in transit and at rest. In transit means when it's being transferred from the time or being accessed, while at rest means this packet is encrypted. I can't modify it without the actual key. And just closing on this section, some very high level overview. You also need to be familiar with encryption, some encryption concepts. You will have things like, what is ciphertext? Or how does this encrypt and this key work, etc. Just be familiar with it. You don't need to have a whole cybersecurity course, but you kind of need to be familiar with it. But all right, that is everything for the Associate Data Practitioner certification. As always, thank you for your patience and thank you for watching my channel. If you have any recommendations, let me know. And if you attempt this exam, best of luck. Bye bye.